Welcome everyone to the CSG Conservatism Philosophy class. As always, we are learning together and reading together and learning from our great leader, Kwame Nkrumah. As you know, those that have been before, you're very welcome. And if I don't think there's anyone new, we take turns reading. We start with reading the paragraph, and then we will, if there's anyone that has identified a word that they want to understand or don't know the meaning of, please call it out and we'll look it up together. And after that, we will start our round discussion. So everyone has a chance to speak, to share their thoughts on the text. And this is a safe space, as you all know. We're here to learn from each other. There's no judgment, there's no silencing of thoughts. We're all here students, we are liberators, we are revolutionaries. So everyone's thoughts are very, very valuable and very welcome. Right, so to start us off, I'll ask Sister Portia to please read the paragraph for us. And after that, we'll have round discussions where everyone will share their opinion or thoughts on the text. Thank you. Sister Portia?
Thank you, Queen Sister Myra. Many greetings all. One of these subtle methods is to be found in the account of history. The history of Africa as presented by European scholars has been encumbered with malicious myths. It was even denied that we were a historical people. It was said that whereas other continents had shaped history and determined its course, Africa had stood still, held down by inertia, that Africa was only propelled into history by the European contact. African history was therefore presented as an extension of European history. Hegel's authority was lent to this ahistorical hypothesis concerning Africa, which he himself unhappily helped to promote. And apologists of colonialism lost little time in seizing upon it and writing wildly thereon. In presenting the history of Africa, of our traditional presence of the European advent, colonialism and imperialism employed their account of African history and anthropology as an instrument of their oppressive ideology. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Sister Mara, are you around?
Yes, do you want me
Sister
to?
No, I want you to help chair the meeting, or
Oh,
in there.
okay. Can we have another reader just to read it one more time? Thank you so much, Sister Portia. Please, if someone could volunteer.
Can I volunteer, Sister Myra?
Yes, please do.
Okay, thank you. But permit me, Sister Myra, to, because I'm seeing you say one of these pattern. So permit me to maybe connect the upper sentence where the pattern was introduced. Then I can link it to this. So
Thank
the
you.
upper sentence of the previous class was saying, from the word, the individual is not an anarchic unit. He lives in orderly surroundings, and the achieving of this orderly surrounding calls for methods of both explicit and subtle. So we are referring to an individual. So it goes ahead to say that one of these subtle methods is to be found in the account of history. The history of Africa, as presented by European scholars, has been encumbered with malicious myths. It was even denied that we were a historical people. It was said that whereas other continents had shaped history and determined its course, Africa had stood still, held down by inertia. That Africa was only propelled into history by the European contact. African history was therefore presented as an extension of European history. Hegel's authority was lent to this, a historical hypothesis concerning Africa, which he himself unhappily helped to promote. And apologists of colonialism lost little time in seizing up on it and writing widely their own. In presenting the history of Africa as the history of the collapse of our traditional society in the presence of European advent, colonialism, and imperialism employed their account of African history and anthropology as an instrument of their oppressive ideology. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Pigeon. Does anyone want to have a word looked up?
Inertia, encumbered, myths.
In inertia, you said, Sawindok?
Yes. Encumbered and myths.
Brother Pigeon, could you please help me look up those words, and then we can.
Yeah, I will help. But if there's anybody who can also help us, please go ahead.
Okay, inertia,
So which words
Yes.
are they again? Encumbered, yeah?
encumbered. Yes.
Encumbered.
Encumbered with malicious myths. Yeah, so basically,
Encumbered.
encumbered simply means
Restrict.
you've been clothed, and they've let you put on this thing that is weighing you down. You know, so that's essentially what it means, that the myths are used by the Sister Portia. I think I saw your your emojis. Thank you so much. So yeah, so encumbered basically means, yes, that you or the African has been clothed, or they have put malicious myths around the African, and these myths are basically misleading or weighing down the African. That's the first word. I hope that is clearer, make things clearer, brother. Inertia basically is the lack of motion. So as you know, in constantism, there are three types of motion. There is the motion where you move in a straight line. Then there is the motion where you move in circles, like the way the way the earth revolves around it's on its axis, and then it revolves around the sun. So those are all what we call circular motion. Then there is a third motion, which is a change in properties. So to be held down by inertia means that basically there's no motion. You know, you are not moving, and you're not moving sometimes because in physics, and our brother is not here to explain to us very well what it means. But in physics, when there's inertia, it means that the force that is moving something has been balanced by an opposing force, such that even though you are moving, the opposite force, which is stopping you from moving, is equal. Therefore, you remain in the same place. So that's inertia from a physicist's and a non-physicist sense. What was the third word? So encumbered, inertia.
Myths.
Sorry?
With malicious myths.
Yeah, myth basically is a story, isn't it? A myth is a story that is not that it doesn't mean it's not true, but it is you can't prove it scientifically. You know, it's a story that can be proven. You know, and there are many stories like that. And it doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that it happened so long ago, or so far back in our history, that nobody can quite remember exactly the details. So it's a story that people pass on. Yeah, and there are many of them. And then there's a sense in which also myth also is when people make stereotypical pronouncements, you know, like the slave is lazy, you know, as if they expect a slave, an enslaved person, to work very hard when he or she is not being paid. I mean, the idea that you should work very hard, but you'll not be paid. You know, so if you refuse to work hard, so your enslaver can be wealthy, then they say you are lazy, as if laziness is part of your nature. So that is. I mean, there are many myths in different, even in physics, in science, there is a myth that the universe began with a big bang. You know, nobody has really proven that such a big bang ever existed, but you know, yeah. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Kwame.
Yeah,
Can I add something there?
Yes.
In general, I understand, or it is understood that myth borders more towards falsehood. That
why?
I don't know, but that's the way I understood it, or I have made myself to understand.
Okay.
But it's not the case, right?
No, not as far as I understand. So, for instance, the Greeks themselves say that they were uncivilized and that they lived in caves and that they did not know how to cook food. They did not know how to make anything. And that whilst living in that state of nature, they were visited by Africans from the continent, like Danaus and Cecrops. And according to them, it is these Africans who taught them how to make fire, how to make clothes, how to make oil, how to make all the things they needed in order for them to live a civilized life. Now, these are the Greeks themselves saying that. But these things, this happened before the Greeks started writing their history. So this part of the story is not written. It was passed down orally. So it is seen. So if you Google it, for instance, you will see that it's described as a myth. As a myth because it's not written down. So, I think Brother Pigeon has dropped off. Yeah. Yes, Brother
He's back.
Anyway, he's back. Okay. So then what happens is that once he drops off, I'm made the host, and then he's been remade the host. That's okay. So brother Windhawk. So the one of the essential things about myth is that it's not written. It's not a written thing. It's not written down anywhere, and that it is passed on, which doesn't mean that it's not true. So, for example, did Socrates exist? Well, we know through the writings of Plato that Socrates existed, don't we? But did he really exist? Is what I'm saying. And the man didn't write anything. Everything we know about Socrates came from what Plato said. You understand? Now, a contemporary of Plato is a Yoruba man called Orunmila. Now, those of you know the history of African philosophy in terms of West Africa will know that Orunmila was a contemporary of Socrates. They both happened to come from the same working background. You know, they were blacksmiths, and they both did not write anything. And it's only in modern history, as I understand it, that the sayings of Orunmila were written by scholars. So right now we have the writings of Orunmila. The question is, did Orunmila himself exist? Was he a real person? So I'm only using these examples to say that I appreciate how you've made to understand it, and the way it's put across. You are right. It's put across as if something is mythical, that means it's a lie. Not at all. There are myths also in the Bible, aren't there? If you read the Bible, it talks about how there was war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought, and Satan or Lucifer and his angels also fought, and they fought and fought. There was war, and then at the end of the war, this group of angels were driven out of heaven, paradise, and they ended up on this earth. Now, who here has seen that war? I mean, where is it? Where is it? Who was there? I mean, if this really happened, who was there to see it happen? So there are myths everywhere, brother. But those who are Christians, it is true, it happened, and and as
Brother Kwame. Okay, I think we've lost.
He has spoken about heaven.
I think it's because
You have to tease him when he come back, Elder. Please tease him.
I think it's more likely that he's in a train and he's lost signal.
Thank Thank you, Queen Sister Myra. That's right. What are the facts? What are the facts?
But Sir Windhoek, was he able to explain? Did you get an answer from what he explained there? Was that helpful?
Very much so. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so while we wait for Brother Kwame to get back his signal, I'll start going around the group, and I'm just going to go through the names as they appear before my list as usual. And when I call upon your name, please unmute and share your thinking on the text that we have just read. So I think the first name is Brother Pigeon.
Sister Mara, you'll excuse me a bit. I'll be coming maybe later, please. Pass for now.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Brother Coco, you're up next. Brother Coco, are you able to speak?
Sorry guys, can you skip me for now? For some family thing here. I'll come back.
I'll come back to you as well.
Yes.
We have Sister Portia next.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Queen Sister Myra. All right, the first sentence is saying to see examples of methods, whether they are explicit or subtle, read history. The second sentence is saying, know that African history has a lot of myths, which could be fallacies or lies or stereotypes, and noted Prost's point that myths are not necessarily lies. And this is why I emphasize could be. The third sentence is that these could be fallacies, lies, or stereotypes. It said that Africans did not have a history. The fourth sentence, basically, again, that these could be fallacies, lies, or stereotypes, were that African history was stagnant, and it only moved with Europe. And the fifth sentence, Africa was seen by and through Europe. Fallacy, then Europe started Africa, for instance. A sixth sentence is saying, and let me name this person, and I'll give a comment on why I'm doing this. It's, I believe, George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. I believe that is his full name. I'll make sure I double check that. And it's saying that he was one of those pushing such could be fallacies, lies, and stereotypes. The seventh sentence is then apologists of colonialism, they followed suit. The eighth sentence, the last sentence here, is saying that in terms of ideology, you can really see them: colonialism, imperialism, and anthropology. And so my comments are four, and I'll take them by the four sentences that stood out to me. The first sentence, this reminds me of what I was saying about how oppressive English language is, because you see, the English language doesn't differentiate whether history could be lied, could be a lie. It's just calling it history. So I ponder, could we say unfactual history? You know how they say fake news. So is it even history at all if it's unfactual? That just stuck at me about how oppressive and manipulative the English language is, arguably, because it presumes that history is automatically factual. And then the fourth sentence was saying something that in this clip I saw this week. It's titled Inside Bedford Stuyvesant, and it was Jim Lowry, Harry Belafonte, and Roxy Roker. And in there, the human rights defender, Harry Belafonte, he was mentioning what is in this fourth sentence. And I'm paraphrasing quite loosely. And he was saying, for example, that we Africans, and I would say Africans after Akibalanese after the 15th century, we were conditioned to compete and compare with a fallacy of the perfect European. And then my other point is the sixth sentence is that why I mentioned naming this person. I have said this before. I read the Miseducation of the Negro, and I noticed I was doing some copy edits, and I was suggesting to the publisher that we should put their full names, because in the Miseducation of the Negro, you would hear the last name only. It was presumed that we know who they are. Yeah, but if you go back into the book, the names of the Africans of African heritage, their full names were there. You see, and think about it also, or please, if you may, when you hear, oh, Einstein. I said, well, who is Einstein? You see the presumption that I am to know who is Einstein. But will we know, for example, well, arguably people may know Fannie Lou Hamer, yet we'll never say, well, you know Hamer. You see that? And then the last point is the seventh sentence. It just reminds me, and I'm not trying to beat up on them, so don't come from me, well-meaning liberals. Those, I remember Mr. El Hajj Malik Shabazz said he would rather be knowing directly in contact with a racist, because a Ku Klux Klan member, because at least he would know that KKK person does not like him, versus the well-meaning liberals who attempt to apologize for colonialism and then make a further oppression. I yield.
Thank you very much, Sister Pasha. No one is going to come for you. No, we all respect everyone's opinion here. Thank you very much for your contribution. The next on my list is Elder Sam.
Thank you, Sister Man. Members on the platform, good evening, everybody. I saw Sister Tapiwa says she's having connectivity problems, so she will just listen. In terms of the text tonight, I think it's just an elucidation of what we read previously, and I think we should not forget that the explicit and subtle methods that they are talking about here stems from the two basic methods where they spoke about cohesion and cohesion. And in terms of our history, I think this is where the Europeans really did harm to most of us in the continent. And, you know, if you follow the history of South Africa, you'll know that the whites claim to have found land that was empty, unoccupied, nobody. This is one of their myths. Despite the fact that just for them to be there, they had to be helped by our people, because most of them were seasick. Most of them were dying of scurvy because they were traveling in those open seas for so many years and days. And our people saved them using our own herbs, using our own medical knowledge. And these are the myths that they came later to say. And if you read in the passage, this Hegel who was a German a philosopher, ignored the history that his forebears of the British encountered with the Asante Empire, which was a highly developed empire, which had military prowess, which had economic development in all spheres politically. But because they wanted to perpetuate this, they said Africa was a dark continent. You know, they say we were savages. We were living in the bush without any clothes, which is not true. Our people were already knitting. Our people were already grinding animal skins and making clothes with that. So all these myths were just to perpetuate the myth that they were the advanced people and they found us, and they claim, even they go to the extent of claiming that we were static, which is not true. We were already hunting, we were already smelting iron, making bow and arrows. We were making poisons. Those arrows that we were using for bow and arrows, our forebears had even poisons that they took from snakes, that they took from other vegetation and made the arrows even deadlier. And that's how we managed to resist even colonialism itself. All our forebears that fought colonialism were using all the knowledge that we already had when they arrived in our continent. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Sam. I think I would also extend what you said to how our brothers and sisters in Haiti were forced to pay for the colonialism because, you know, it was a good thing, so they had to pay back a debt because, you know, colonialism was good for us, you know. So I think those attitudes, I think here in this paragraph, the author is telling us that these attitudes were based in the philosophical thinking of our invaders, and they have persisted up till now in the modern era. Thank you, Elder Sam. The next one on my list is Elder Mafole.
Good evening.
Good evening, Elder.
I've just come in and I'll be very happy to listen, please.
Okay. Sir Windhoek, you're up next.
Yes. Yeah. Brother Sam has reminded me of some of the methods, cohesion and yeah, be that as it may, I want to understand the sentence from Hegel's Authority. Can Brother Pigeon please read that again and somebody explain what Hegel's Authority is, what it means here? I'm completely blank about that specific sentences. Thank you.
Brother Pigeon.
Okay, thank you. Let me reread what Brother Windhoek has requested. But I'll go a paragraph before, then connect with this paragraph. The paragraph before says that African history was therefore presented as an extension of European history. Hegel's authority was lent to this, a historical hypothesis concerning Africa, which he himself unhappily helped to promote.
Brother Pigeon, any
Yeah.
thoughts on that particular sentence? Or anyone for that matter?
I'll request Brother Kwame, or if any member can help. Brother Coco, hand it up, Sister Myra.
Brother Coco, yes, please go ahead.
Oopsie. Do you hear me, comrades?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. What we are talking about here today is continuation of the use of ideology to either bring in change or to protect the system that you already have in place. So what we are being taught here is that the Europeans used identity erasure, all right, identity and historical erasure of the Africans as an oppressive ideology. So let's start from there, and then I'll be able to answer Severin Hook's question. This is where our philosophers like Fanon, Biko, Malcolm X, and the others say we need to decolonize our minds. We need to decolonize. By decolonization, we reclaim our identities because we lost those identities when we were colonized. So, in short, colonization wasn't just exploitation of resources, it was also a domination of one people by another. It was used to denigrate the Africans as having had no history whatsoever, nothing of worth. All right. So by making you as a people to feel that way is destroying your identity, is totally making you a nobody. And once you are a nobody, you are being compared with another race or another ethnicity because there's one human race. And you then gravitate towards the other ethnicity because they have a superior history, they have a superior identity, they have the supremacy. So this is what was happening here. And Dr. Nkrumah is saying, open your eyes and realize your identity was erased, your history was erased. You've been told that Africans did not write any history, did not make any history. And people like Hegel, who was then a philosopher of note in Europe, he said Africa had no history or did not contribute anything of note. Then they use that to justify coming to Africa and implementing colonization and imperialism. Let that sink in. It's the same thing that they used when they came to Africa and took African slaves into the West. They used to say the African needed to be converted. The African was a savage, or in other cases, they say the African was an animal or a savage, did not have a soul. Those are some of the myths that they what do you call it, perpetrated, peddled. They peddled such myths to engender the idea that Africa was backward and Europe was developing Africa. Let's not forget why they came to Africa. They will tell you that it was a saving mission. They call it civilizing mission. So we needed to be modernized by them, hence why they came to us. And if we don't have history, we don't have anything to fall back on, we didn't have anything pre-colonization, is their hypothesis here or their claim, then they have a very strong case for why they had to come to our countries. So propaganda was then used, and if it's supported by people like Hegel, who is an intellectual at that time, it then carries some meaning for them. It becomes true. And when they say this, the writers, they started writing widely, it meant they perpetrated or peddled the lies which Hegel used, or the unsubstantiated claims which Hegel used. They then went ahead and spread it around. By spreading it around, it helps the colonization, and imperialism case. That's why we're hearing about colonial apologists. Those are the people who were defending colonization as a saving grace for the Africans, because the Africans did not have any history. The Europeans came to discover them. Let's not forget, they discovered us. That's why they came and named Musiwa Tunya, Victoria Falls. They named Lake Victoria. They named Port Elizabeth or East London. There are several. Africa is littered with colonial names. We even had Stanley Falls in the Congo from Stanley, the journalist who was sent here by Leopold, who came also to look for David Livingstone. So it became an instrument of suppression, instrument of oppression for the Africans. So what he is saying here is exactly what Fanon is saying. Reclaim your identity. Rewrite your history. Don't learn your history with European lenses. Find your history. I hope that helps you, Selwyn Hook. This is something which I feel very strongly about. Hopefully you can hear.
Yes, it does a great deal.
It does. But can I add? Sorry, but I will not finish what you're saying.
Yeah, but what baffles me is the paradox in the statement, which he himself unhappily helped to promote. Was he coerced, or why was he promoting it unhappily?
Okay, so
why
let
the
me.
paradox?
Yeah,
If
so
it is standpoint.
Yeah, so let me answer that, brother Wayne.
Thank you.
So that, yeah, let me answer that. So the question is why? So this is not my contribution, by the way. I'm just bringing some history here. It would be nice to have had a historian among us, just as we had Brother Carrington, who is a physicist, and therefore when we get to matters of physics, he's able to come in and explain. But as we have no historians amongst us, let's do it ourselves. So the question then is, and Brother Winhock's question is very crucial, because in a way he's asking, why is Hegel so important that Nkrumah mentions him in this paragraph when it comes to history? And the answer is that Hegel was a German philosopher, and he was a professor in the University of Berlin. Does Berlin ring a bell, guys? Hello, does Berlin ring a bell?
Yeah, the Berlin.
Yes.
Berlin Conference, yes, that's it. So he was a professor in Berlin, German philosopher, and he wrote, or he proposed, if you like, a historical account of the world according to Europe. And there's a lot. We require a whole session on Hegel and the things he did. But suffice to say that he was a racist. Basically, he put aside a grand historical narrative, which I'm sure some of you are already familiar with, which we have used ourselves. but not in the same sense as he did. And that is a dialectical theory. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Now, this dialectical theory, again, Brother Anu is not here. When he does come, he can tell us a bit about it. But the dialectical theory itself is not German. It has its roots in Africa and African scholarship, by which I mean the books they stole from us. Yeah, when Alexander went and they ransacked our libraries, that's where they found these things. So they didn't invent them; they just got them from us. So Hegel basically set forth this grand historical narrative, and he in this history he claimed that history was always, basically he said history was a rational process, and that it was always moving forward towards freedom, and that Europe is the apex of that history, and that when you see Europe, when you see Europeans, you are seeing the end result of the historical process. So, and Hegel had a lot of academic power, because as a professor at Berlin University, he trained generations of scholars, you see, and these scholars spread his ideas across disciplines like history, politics, and theology. Now, in his history, he talks about the stages of civilization, and he gave lectures on the philosophy of history, 1837, and he ranked continents. You know, he put continents in a hierarchy, and Africa was not even in that hierarchy. He placed Africa outside history, calling it
Brother Kwame,
Can you hear me?
I've shared the lecture you are referring to, the lectures of philosophy and history.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So he called it unhistorical. That's Africa, by the way. Childlike, and that Africa lacked spirit. And it was a pseudoscientific hierarchy justified, which justified colonialism as progress. So in other words, by putting the history this way, what Hegel did was to provide what you call the superstructure, or the ideological justification for colonialism. Because if Africa is outside history, then European colonization is what brings Africa from outside history into history. Now, who are some of the thinkers that he influenced? Our own Karl Marx. So Karl Marx, as you know, adopted Hegel's dialectics. But what Karl Marx did is he rejected, because Hegel was an idealist. So Hegel believed that spirit and ideas basically rule the world. So when Hegel talked about rational process, he meant that ideas were evolving through this dialectics of thesis, thesis, antithesis, and so on. So and synthesis. So Karl Marx turned it upside down, and Karl Marx said that thesis was matter, not spirit. Yeah. So and so on and so forth. I don't want to go into that. And then there were existentialists, some of who were French, like Sartre, the philosopher, fascists like Mussolini, who drew on Hegel's ideas. But Hegel was criticized, as you know, by C.L.R. James and Franz Fanon. In fact, Hegel did a lot of damage to Africa because of his status as a great philosopher, and because of his racist claims about Africa, and because they were uncritically accepted and repeated for over a century. And you find them in textbooks. In fact, I have a book here that summarizes all the claims about how Africa was basically, they just insulted us, wrote us off, said we were savages and so on. And every great, when I say great here in inverted commas, every great Western philosopher that you can think of, all of them, name them, they were all racists because they all bought into Hegel's racist history. So that is Hegel, the person. So in short, the reason Nkrumah is mentioning Hegel here is a damage because the racism in academia, in all parts of academia, that are still there. So I buy books on mathematics that were written many, many years ago, and you find the same racism there, that Africans were children when it comes to mathematics. despite the fact that the Greeks said it is the Africans who taught us mathematics. This is what the Greeks themselves wrote, that Africans taught us geometry and all that we know, and so and yet you have Hegel, saying that Africa was unhistorical. So Hegel did a lot of damage. His intellectual rigor, because of the dialectical theory, his Eurocentrism and colonial power was very toxic, and it's had an enduring legacy. When I come to contributing myself, when I come there, I will lay out briefly how that history has been reversed now. I think we are lucky. The East Africans, the South Africans weren't so lucky. I think Sister Tapua has mentioned this, that we need to remember that the idea that Africans were not humans was not continental. It certainly wasn't West African. They didn't infest West Africa with that idea. But where they settled, like from East Africa all the way to Southern Africa, where they settled, they infested the African population with this obnoxious idea that they were nothing. And so when I was in South Africa after apartheid, I was in South Africa for about 6 months. I went to do a course at the University of the Witwatersrand, and when I was there, I came face to face with young men and women in the university telling me that, and then on air saying that until they started, in fact, until apartheid came to an end, and then to a large extent they were hearing other voices. Before then, they thought they were nothing. They didn't even know that they had contributed anything to history, because the racist Europeans in South Africa made it clear to the Africans, and Brother Sam, you can bear me witness or dispute what I'm saying, that the Africans did not contribute anything to history. And you can imagine what that does to you when you are told that, you are just maybe, that you are nothing, you are a nobody, you are just fit to be a hewer of wood and a drawer of water. Your role is just to be like a donkey that carries goods, or a horse that carries human beings, or a cow that plows the field. It's very damaging. The damages once. Brother Mafolo is here. He's an expert on this, so I'm sure he can say something about this. Brother Mafolo, you won't just listen. You need to come in here and tell us a bit more about the effect of this on our psyche, because I think it's something you talk about, and even today you make us understand that the effect is still with us. So in terms of the history, let me end there. I hope that kind of adds to what Brother Coco has said. There is more, but I want to, because we only have 2 hours. I want to end there. But just let me quickly draw our attention to the ahistorical part. So Hegel claimed that Africa had no meaningful history, development, or progress, and framed it as a stagnant continent held down by inertia. So those words that Nkrumah used, I don't know, but I believe they are traceable to what Hegel himself said. And just to end on that, why this was wrong was that it was factually false. It was not true. Africa had thriving civilizations: Mali, Ethiopia, Egypt, Great Zimbabwe, long before European contact. In fact, as I said, according to Greek mythology, it is even Africans who civilized them. and Europeans, as you know, were living in caves when Africans, you know, were at the height of history and so on. So it was factually false. There was philosophical bias. You know, he never visited Africa. His views were based on racist Enlightenment era stereotypes. It wasn't based on evidence. And for a historian, it was really bad. And then the legacy of harm. His ideas really did a lot of harm because it became academic dogma, erasing Africa's contributions to global history. When you look at the history of anything, I'll end with this one. Whenever you look at the history of anything, they always start with the Greeks. They always say the Greeks, you know, even though the Greeks, and because I teach mathematics, I try to use as an example that the Greeks themselves said that, look, the Africans taught us everything. I have the book here, you know, put together by Open University, you know, with historical facts drawn from the writings of the Greeks themselves, which the OU has put together as a reader for its mathematics course. Come on. And yet this is what Hegel did to us. But as I said, when I come to my own contribution, I will try and explain how that has now been corrected, not wholly, but to a large extent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Kwame. Yes, Brother Pigeon.
Will you allow me to request Brother Kwame to, if there's any link on what this Nkrumah said at this particular moment with what you are dealing with now, Brother Kwame. At this, I've gone back to Nkrumah.
Oh, yes. In fact, you see, there you go. So can you imagine what colonial students went through when you're a colonial student and you are being told in the classroom in that, you know, you are nothing, you know, you are just like a donkey that carries, or a camel that carries load across the Sahara, or you are a horse that carries humans, or that you are a cow that plows the field, and you are nothing, and you sit in the class and you are being taught this, you know, and it really did a lot of damage. And that's what Nkrumah is talking about. And Nkrumah himself experienced it, by the way. And yes, so thank you for drawing our attention to this.
Thank you, Brother Kwame. Okay, so now I'll move on to Brother General Nonaki.
Mama Africa, give thanks. That's it. Give thanks also to everyone at large. It is dark in the southern hemisphere. I give thanks even to you for the explanation from Elder Kwame there. Yeah. So for my take to summarize this text, I'll mostly comment on that part of the last part, which says, in presenting the history of Africa as the history of the collapse of our traditional societies in the presence of the European advent, colonialism and imperialism employ the account of African history and anthropology as an instrument of their oppressive ideology. But then thanks to the great Sheikh Anta Diop from Senegal, one of the most prestigious scientists we had in Africa in that time, where he was working, during, how it works in the white society. Even if the black man is more intelligent than the white scientist, he must work under the white scientist. So that was happening with Sheikh Anta Diop. He worked under a French scientist, and through that he had access to one of the most prestigious telescopes of that time. And he is the one who actually reinvented, I say reinvented because technology of the Anunnaki, whereby he had a chemical to test a dead body, whether was it African or was it otherwise. Because of this anthropology, the Europeans used as an instrument of oppressive ideology, stating that Egypt was not a city of black people, but it was a city of white and brown people. So Sheikh Anta Diop did it. He managed to get a mummy from Egypt, tested it, and voila, the mummy was 100% dark melanin. And he tested the others, same. So that, and then they had that UNESCO, you know, those big gatherings they had where they discussed these African histories. And Sheikh Anta Diop, along with Teotil Openga, I think this was another great man, scientist of Africa. I think he was from Uganda. I'm not sure. And both of them, they utterly destroyed all those white scientists in that UNESCO meeting. I still have the document. It was a disgrace for the white men. So ever since that time, it became clear that Egypt belonged to ancient black people. And so from that up until today, we are rebuilding and regaining our ancient African roots piece by piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Anunnaki. Next, we have Elder Glenroy. Elder Glenroy, if you... Okay. I think Elder Glenroy can't speak at the moment, so we'll move on to Sister. Oh, okay. Greetings.
I've only greetings, my sister. I've only just joined, so I'd rather listen for a while to get the conversation. Okay.
All right. Sister Chisomo. Sister Chisomo, if you're able to speak, please unmute.
Yeah, I've just joined as well, so I was just listening what everybody was saying. And I can only comment on just a little bit on the Egyptian. I've seen a video that says how they made Egypt white, but it was just a clip, so I'm looking for the actual full video about how they made Egypt white because it was black people. And the attempts of making all these other places white, and the trick of them to come into Africa and turn certain countries into white, which they attempted with South Africa, Zimbabwe, Egypt, and Morocco, and all these other places. And then the people would turn around to say they're not Africans when they're living in Africa. That's all I can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Chisomo. Brother Coco, I think I'll just give you some time. I'm very sorry for what's happened, and my heart goes out to your queen, and I hope she feels better. That's why we are fighting for our liberation and decolonization.
Mera,
yes.
I'm ready to speak if
Yes, I was going to call on you next, Brother Pigeon.
Thank you. And then after that, I will be able to call you to come and speak, and then maybe take it to the comments over there. So also prepare for that. I'm very interested on the element in the first sentence of the word "fatal method" that I found in our account on account of history. That's very important that when you look at history serves as an ideology. And I remember, is it Marcus Garvey said, or is it Sankara, about their history? Garvey talk about it's like a tree without its roots. Yeah, Garvey talk about something like that. That is like a tree without its roots. But if our roots are to be made in our history, what are subtle methods we can find in our history? Can we be able to go to an extra method to identify the subtle things that have been done in our history, but we may not take much consideration about them, but they're there to pursue a certain ideology. And that's why I'm interested in that subtle method. So some of us might not be going straight to look at the subtle method You rather want to look at what's the obvious on the openings, but there are so many things in there. But in the second sentence, they say the history of Africa as presented by European scholars. Of course, you know that how can somebody tell you a history and you expect to tell it better? And I think it's also Sankara who said, we are going to rewrite our history. And I think it's high time we rewrite our history, because there's no way European scholars can actually present our history in whatever way. Sometimes I appreciate some good books they have written about Africa. But even when I appreciate them, I don't fully trust them, because I'm not sure if they're ready to face the truth in their writing. Because the intention then in their writing is what you need to check at. What is their intention when they write our history? When they provide books about Kenya, Somali, and all those other countries they want to talk about, what is their real intention in the writing? Because there are some truths that do not confine with their ideology, and therefore they'll find a way on how to put it. So you have to accept that they were actually full of malicious things. And you see, in the third sentence, they say that it was even denied that you were historical people. Even if you go to the history of the human being, the origin of so-called being, it doesn't start with the white man. So why do they claim we don't have history? And I think it's not that we didn't have history. I think because the white man could put in a bigger paper that we can read today, we wrote it in hieroglyphics, we were having writing. And in fact, they read our writing. And some of them even were educated in our schools. We taught them before they even had those so-called universities. You go to the back, I'm looking, for example, when I was looking at history, because I'm a historian I know as a teacher, but I'm also a colonial student suffering from colonial history that was being informed of my life. I did my history even at the university level, a degree in history, but the history I'm taught is the history that starts from the white man's introduction. When they talk of the only history I get back a bit is when they talk of the Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, and the rest. Then from there, our history begins with the exploration of a white man, which basically starts some centuries after. So this is what they did. And when you read the external, they say that it was said that whereas other continents had shaped history and determined its course, Africa had stood still. Really? the things sometimes I come across here. We stood still and held down inertia. That Africa was only propelled into history by European contact. You see, and I think it's very fundamental for all of us to actually read our history. And our history that is written by our people, not our history that is written by them. And that's why one of the things sometimes when we started the Pan-African Library was to look for writings that have been done by Africans. And some of us tend to think that we didn't write. There's so many scholars like what Minaki is telling about Cheikh Anta Diop, the destruction of Black civilization. We know who we were. We know even the word Europa or Europe came from African queens. And so many things that they did and how they changed it. But how many of us are ready to go that extra mile? How many of us are ready to go that deep in the history? Because if you don't have that deep root in the history, you become what Marcus Garvey say, a tree without its root. So our arguments about our past start with what a white man writes. And that's why they say that they discovered they call it Lake Victoria. As if we blacks who are there were not people to discover. How did they treat us? They say they discovered Lake whatever in Zimbabwe or Zambia. Well, we took them there. So were we not people enough to discover? They talked about America, about Christopher Columbus. They don't tell us about people who were there before Christopher. So, and they even assume that they came from nowhere or we came from them. Because if they came from us, then They must have a history of their parents, unless they want to claim that they didn't have parents. So this is what I'm getting, and I think it's making also subtle impact in our minds and in our personalities as people. And sometimes we assume also the impact and what Brother Kwame was saying. So I also look at it to where it says that, of course, the Hegel contribution, Brother Kwame has actually mentioned about that. And I'm interested in this part that says that an apologist of colonialism. How many apologists do you have up to date? There are so many apologists of even your colonialism, never even colonialism. Some of us today are still apologists of neocolonialism. And we are not afraid to tell them that. But you see what the apologists of colonialism did? That's no time. They took the opportunity to start citing their own things to justify. And in presenting the history of Africa as a history of the collapse of our traditional society, in the presence of European advent, colonialism and imperialism play the account. So I'm really finding, and the key thing here is what Brother Anunnaki also said, that history and anthropology are instruments of their oppressive ideology. History and anthropology. So that's why they want to say that they came to civilize us, to save us, to show us the way, to teach us who we are. So many things. So I think I'm really appreciating Nkrumah bringing history in society. And I think it's very important why he brings history in this level of society in this discussion. But I'll have to end it there and probably ask Brother Kwame when he'll be coming into actually maybe also help us a bit. Why is Nkrumah introducing history here when you talk about ideology and society? Thank you very much, Sister Myra. Back to you to take Brother Glenn, then I'll take you later. I'll take all the names that are absent, those who haven't spoken, then I'll come back to you and then we'll go to Brother Kwame.
Thank you, Brother Pigeon. Elder Glenroy, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just really want to add a little to the last speaker. There are still many African people around the globe who believes that Europeans do not do some of the things that we are clear about and that it's deliberate. You know, I remember recently going to the Great Lake, which is the upper part of Tanzania. It took us several hours to drive there, in fact, almost 2 days. And keep saying, you know, we're going to the Great Lake. And fellow Africans corrected me that this was Lake Victoria. And I'm asking, well, who is this Victoria? Somebody you know? Because as people know, this is named after a European queen or their queen, and so many other things on our continent are named after people who, quite frankly, had nothing to do with us, have not been any benefactor to us. And I had to ask a question, did the European who named or renamed things like the Great Lake, all the water that speaks, did they travel there alone? Were they wandering around, just a bunch of Europeans? Or did they have guides? Did they have African people, local African people as their guides? And when they come onto these places, such as the lake, would the guide have said, this is such and such a place. This is what we call such and such a place. But when you hear that these places have been named and renamed, I should say, by Europeans, who was there with them? you know, did others find Livingston before Stanley? Were we there? And just really want to emphasize what Pigeon is saying about being rewritten or being written out of history. And that's why we need to examine every single thing that Europeans say to us. We need to examine every bit of the history that they've put out there in the public. And it's not just a case of the hunter writing its own history. It's the fact that the lion is reading what the hunter has written and cannot find anything to correct. And this is the real danger. People accept what is being presented to us, even though it doesn't make any sense. How could there be a place called Lake Victoria? How can there be a place called Victoria Falls? How can there be a town called Stanley, etc., etc.? I'm happy to see that they managed to get rid of John Smuts Airport, but there's so much more still to be corrected. So is it accidental that these narratives are written to make us look as if we contributed nothing to who we are? I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Glenroy. I'll come back to Elder Mafole. Are you able to say something? If not, I'll go to Sister Chisomo. You have your hand up.
Yeah, just to comment on what Brother Glenroy has just said about all these names of places of the Europeans or slave masters. And then as a diaspora, we're busy fighting them here, saying, oh, why have you got this statue? He was a racist. He was a slave master. And we're not doing that in Africa. Maybe we should start doing that for the Africans to change all these things. And whilst you're saying that, I've just remembered that in my country, we have this particular triangle. One side is called Henderson Street, the other one is Victoria something, and the other one, I can't remember what it is. Despite Kamuzu trying to change everything, but he changed everything into his name. Kamuzu Bridge, Kamuzu Stadium, Kamuzu Airport, Kamuzu this, Kamuzu that. Another leader comes, takes off all the Kamuzu names, puts in whatever the names he wants. And still, the English roads and whatever are just left intact. That's us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Chisomo. Sister Portia, you have your hand up.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank all who have spoken and how the analysis has come with this paragraph. I think all of us here are saying so much that links to where and what we as Akibalanese Africans, African diasporas, have as our priorities. And I wanted to go back to what one of the speakers said about language and how that language communicates so much in terms of actions, in terms of our thinking, and this is any person in the world. And particularly when I think about it, when I see, for example, our contemporary systems now, and we talked about this, I believe 2 weeks ago about, constitutions and laws, when Queen Sister Tapua was giving some local context about how so much bureaucracy can end up being stagnated. My point being is that language that drives our thoughts, our actions, our behaviors, arguably, We see it all the time. For example, one that comes to mind is being professional. I remember being raised in North America, and it was be professional. And then as I got conscious, aware, I questioned, well, what is professional? And then I realized that that professional was talking about European professionalism. Let us have decorum. Well, that decorum is talking about European decorum. Let us have a discussion, and we will have the protocol as follows. That protocol is of European protocol. So I continue to insist that we leave out what is not indigenous Akibulan. I yield.
Thank you,
Sister
Sister.
Maya,
Yes.
I think it's your time to share your thinking. Please go ahead before we come back to Brother Coco. Please have an opportunity to share your thinking part.
We still have Brother Coco, and then we'll have Brother Kwame.
No, please come in now. I request, or you go after Brother Kwame. Then if we get more time, we'll come to Brother Coco as a rebuttal. Or Brother Coco did not share his thinking. If that's so, then you can go ahead. If Brother Coco hasn't shared his thinking, you can go ahead first.
Brother Coco?
Since I've shared my feeling, my thinking already, I thought you should, Sister.
So I am going to mirror a lot of what has been said. I think it's important that we tell our history and tell our identity. I feel this particular area, can I call it, is one that we can change by changing the education systems and the curriculum and the subjects that are being taught. I've always felt, and I've said it before, that I've always felt that this is a goal that we can achieve as progressive Pan-Africanists. We can achieve in our lifetimes if we put efforts towards it. And I think Brother Pigeon questioned, why did Nkrumah mention history here? And I think throughout this book, up to the point where we are, we've been studying the history of the philosophy, the history of the thinking of our invaders. Because without having that understanding, then we won't understand why we are in this situation, and we won't understand who we are. So history, education is a tool, a weapon that we progressive Africanists can use. And I feel if we organized, it's a tool that can become a reality, an instrument in our fight for liberation of the mind. Because once we've got them, people's minds, and we open their eyes, then we've got more warriors on our side. I yield.
Thank you, Sister Mara. Now you can take over again.
Thank you. Brother Coco, quickly, and then we'll go to Brother Kwame.
Thank you. There is something which troubles me. Frantz Fanon wrote about this before he died, because he was seeing the trouble. He said, if we didn't decolonize, then we will end up being in the situation we are in. So in short, I think Dr. Nkrumah covers a bit of that in the class struggle, the class struggle in Africa, in that we have people who are Africans but are European in mindsets. And Steve Biko was also saying something similar. They said we needed to decolonize. But I see a repeat of that with us as Africans. We are going after the African free trade African Continental Free Trade Area, and we are not dealing with the core issues. We are not dealing or pursuing any of those as Africans. We are continuing to operate as black skins and white masses. We need to decolonize. Otherwise, whatever else we are doing is futile. We are still going to come back to the same position because our elites who are trained in Europe, who have now weaponized education, are still going to continue to dominate us. It's not going to work. It's what we need to learn. And Franz Fanon, to quote in his words, he says, imperialism leaves behind germs of rot, which must be clinically detected and removed from our land, but from our mind as well. So we really need to look at that. And let me just talk about this, the most obvious one. We are saying we are independent. If we say we are independent, then we are buying into their narrative that we're dependent on them before. We were never dependent on them. They were dependent on us, but they came in and wanted to tell the whole world that they were civilizing us, and we were dependent on them. So we need to start decolonizing the language, the narrative, and realize what they are doing is to their own advantage, not ours. And to close it with Steve Biko, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Let's reclaim our minds, ladies and gentlemen. I yield.
Thank you very much, Brother Coco. We have Elder Mafole, if you want to make a contribution, please feel free. If not, I'll move on to Brother Kwame.
Oh, thanks. Let me. Good evening once more.
Greetings.
Yes. Let me just say a few words. I think Brother Coco has said what needs to be said. We need to decolonize ourselves. We need to garner the humility and the courage to look inside, to reclaim our identity. If we don't, then we'll just continue debating. We'll continue. It's okay to understand history, to know history and to understand it. But it does not change the situation. We continue to remain within the clasp of the colonizer. So, in all honesty, I think it is time that we spend more time now talking about, maybe not just even talking, but actually decolonizing, because that's what we need to do. We've talked about history. Our elders created history, the history that we are talking about. We civilized the world. Then it came back to uncivilize us. We have an opportunity, the opportunity to re-civilize humanity, because humanity right now is in serious trouble. We, together with everybody else, are in serious trouble. But if we don't work on our own healing, it will not be possible for us to reclaim our identity. It will not be possible for us to reclaim the positions similar to the positions that our ancestors held. Then we just need to do that. I don't want to talk much. I think let's try to change our focus. Let's focus on transforming ourselves so that we can be able to transform our environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elder Mafole. Brother Coco, is that an old hand or do you have your hand up again? Okay, thank you. Brother Kwame, you have the mic now. Brother Kwame, are you able to? Okay.
Thank you. So, picking up what Brother Mafole has just said, that, and rightly so, that we should focus within ourselves. So let's do that for a moment. Let's just ask ourselves, what are we doing here? Because what Brother maybe Dr. Mafole, to be more precise, is saying is very, very crucial. So what are we doing here? So we have gathered here to do what? When we are reading these texts, why are we reading them? See, that's what Brother Mafole is drawing our attention to. That these readings are meant to help us look within ourselves. Yeah. A lot of us have said a lot, and it's good that these recordings are going on YouTube, because we are leaving our footprints. Yeah, we're leaving our footprints. So in looking within ourselves, we then ask ourselves, as Brother Pigeon asked, why did Nkrumah mention history in this context right here? And to answer that question, let's ask ourselves, what have we been doing so far? So we looked at philosophy in retrospect in chapter 1, which basically means that we turn around, like in Sankofa, the geese with its head turned backward. We went back into, you might even say, mythical history and of philosophy, and look back at where we've come from. And what did we find? We found nothing but African philosophy. And that essentially is what we found. That all Western philosophy, in fact, there's no such thing as Western philosophy. All Western philosophy is just rehashed African philosophy. Sister Portia here has, in the past, sought to remind us that even the way we talk about this is we need to be mindful how we phrase it. Because when we say it's rehashed, as Sister Portia has reminded us in the past, we are in danger of saying that the way it is now is the way our forefathers had it, which it isn't, because it's been weaponized now against us. So we looked at philosophy in retrospect, where we've come from. And there was a conclusion of that chapter in the very last line, the last sentence of that paragraph, of that whole chapter, that essentially that the universe is a natural universe with its basis in matter and its and its laws. That the universe is not a supernatural universe; it's a natural universe. That there is no such thing as supernatural, and by supernatural you mean something that is above nature. That which we cannot see, the unseen, is also part of nature. The gamma rays and so on that we can't see. The radio waves that we can't see. And yet they find a way into our mobile phones and we can hear someone calling us. And yet we can't see these ghosts. But they are all part of nature. And that nature is with solid, gas, liquid, and fire, plasma. Then we went to chapter 2. What was chapter 2 about? In chapter 2, we looked at the relationship between philosophy and society. And we look at different philosophers and what they had to say. Several of them, including Aristotle, and so on, and what they had to say in relation to society. So what is Nkrumah telling us, or has been telling us? Brother Mafolo is saying we should look within ourselves. So Nkrumah is telling us that when you look back at history, you must then ask yourself, what is the relationship between history, between philosophy and society in which I live? I believe it's Brother Glenroy that drew our attention to our current situation, where somebody is referring to a river that our forefathers had names for as Lake Victoria. So we are still surrounded by a neo-colonial context, so we live in it. So Nkrumah in chapter 2 was asking us, look at the society in which you are and look at the philosophy. Ask yourself, which philosophy is underpinning that society? Now we're in chapter 3. And chapter 3 is talking about now society, that society that you looked at in chapter 2, and ideology. So what is Nkrumah saying to us? That we must understand that ideology, that society, the way it's organized, is done using tools. Those tools can also be called instruments. And what are those instruments? Very many. The prominent ones are the ones like the military, or the use of force at different levels. The police, they use force, but not the kind of force that the military have. The military have weapons that police don't have. And then even the military, you have different weapons. The Navy has weapons that the Air Force don't have. The Air Force have weapons that the Navy don't have. The ground troops have weapons. So you have this instrument. Then you have education, another instrument. Then you have other things like housing, drinking water, the basic material needs for which we need to exist, also as instruments. So you have to go to a shop with money. If you don't have money, you can't buy the thing in the shop, even though you can see it, and you're hungry. You don't have money, so you can't buy it, and you are hungry, and you're asking yourself, how can I be so close to food and yet I cannot, and so on and so forth. The time is 2 minutes to 8, so I'm afraid I've run out of time to go further. But what I would say is that, to answer Brother Pigeon's question, is that Nkrumah is telling us that history is an instrument of an ideology. So if the society in which we live believes in certain things or has certain concrete structures in place, it would invent the kind of tools it needs to maintain and defend itself. Therefore, Nkrumah is telling us that as philosophers, because that's what we all are here, we must understand that we need to look at the tools that we will need as Pan-Africanists. you can't just be saying you want a new society. We want a new society. We want a new society. And yet your language denies the very thing you are saying you want. And if you take unity, for instance, which I've been trying to get at, your language is saying that a nation is just you and your ethnicity. So if your language is stopping you from looking at another nation as part of you, then you need a new tool. So in Malawi, for instance, we heard how Banda used Pan-Africanism, which is the idea of multinationals coming together, or different nations coming together to form a new nation, and bonded the Malawians. And then brother Anunnaki reminded us how soldiers came to his house and had captured his family and giving them an ultimatum: you either abandon this or your family will die, and so on. So it's 9 o'clock. I'll stop there. The point I'm making is that history is an instrument of ideology. We will look, it's something we'll come across again anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Kwame. Sister Chisom, I have 1 minute because we've reached the end of our session, and then I'll hand over to Brother Pigeon to make the announcements.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Kwame, for bringing up the Kamuzu issue. I'm still trying to find out why he changed his mind, why he turned against the Africans and looked the other way. I've been given a contact that they say might be able to explain to me, but at the moment, nobody is able to say what happened, what triggered it, and for him to turn the other way. Thank you. So once I get the feedback, I'll come back.
Thank you, Sister Chisomo. Over to you, Brother Pigeon. Brother Pigeon? Okay, I think Brother Pigeon is not available, so I'll thank everyone who has attended, and thank you all for your contributions. As you all know, we have our Saturday Pan-African discussion. Brother Kwame, do you have the presentation title or discussion title on hand?
Saturday is the 19th, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so the title for it's the Continental Diplomatic Corps.
Okay.
Thank
you so much.
I think Brother Mafole has something. He's also offered to speak on the topic, I believe. Yeah, so Continental Diplomatic Corps.
Thank you very much. We hope that you'll all be there, and we'll also have a Tuesday Kiswahili class from 7 o'clock. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll call the meeting closed now.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.